The door clicked shut behind me with a finality that felt louder than any scream. For a moment, I didn't move. I just stood there on the small concrete porch, my baby pressed against my chest, his soft breath warming the hollow space beneath my collarbone. The late afternoon air was colder than it should have been for early spring, and I remember thinking, absurdly, that I hadn't brought his blanket. I stared at the door. White, clean, familiar, and suddenly, not mine. Inside that house were my diaper bag, my wallet, my phone charger, my husband, and my entire life as I had known it. Outside stood me, barefoot, in an oversized cardigan, holding a 7-month-old baby who had no idea his world had just shifted. Behind the door, my mother-in-law's voice rose and fell, sharp and controlled, like the edge of a knife slicing through paper. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard my name. I heard the word ungrateful. I heard my husband's name too, but I didn't hear his footsteps. I knocked once, softly, then again, harder this time. "Daniel?" My voice trembled despite how much I tried to steady it. "Daniel, please open the door." Silence. My son stirred in my arms and let out a small whimper, his tiny fingers curling into the fabric of my sweater, as if he could sense my fear. I swayed instinctively, the way mothers do without thinking, even when their own world is falling apart. "Please," I whispered, pressing my forehead lightly against the door. "It's getting cold. He needs his bottle." Still, nothing. That was the moment I realized something far more painful than being locked out. I wasn't just being shut out of the house, I was being shut out of my marriage. Before that day, my life had been ordinary, quiet, predictable in the way I once thought meant safe. I woke up every morning at 6:30 a.m., usually before the sun because my son, Noah, had inherited his father's internal clock. He would coo softly in his crib instead of crying, like he didn't want to inconvenience anyone. I used to joke that he was the gentlest soul in the house. I would scoop him up, kiss his warm cheek, and carry him into the kitchen where the smell of coffee already lingered most mornings. My mother-in-law, Linda, liked to wake up early. She said it was a habit from years of running a proper home. The first time Daniel told me we'd be living with his mother for just a while after Noah was born, I had nodded without hesitation. It made sense financially. Daniel's job had gone through layoffs, my maternity leave was unpaid, and Linda had a large 2-story home in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio with rose bushes lining the front walkway and a grandfather clock that chimed every hour. "It'll help us get back on our feet," Daniel had said, squeezing my hand. "Mom wants to help." And in the beginning, it did feel like help. Linda cooked dinners every night. Roast chicken, meatloaf, casseroles that filled the house with warm, buttery smells. She folded laundry without being asked. She even held Noah while I showered, though she always commented on how I shouldn't spoil him by picking him up so often. I told myself that was just her generation. I told myself she meant well. Our days settled into a rhythm. Daniel left for work by 8. I stayed home with Noah, tidying the living room, wiping down counters, trying to make myself feel less like a guest in someone else's home. Linda would move through the house with quiet authority, adjusting things I had already cleaned, reorganizing cabinets, and occasionally sighing in ways that were just subtle enough to make me question myself. "You load the dishwasher a little inefficiently," she said once, gently, as she rearranged the plates I had placed minutes earlier. "Oh," I replied with a nervous smile. "I can fix that." "It's all right," she said, already fixing it herself. Little things like that, small corrections, tiny remarks wrapped in politeness. At first, Daniel would laugh them off. "That's just Mom," he'd say, kissing my temple. "She likes things her way." And I believed him. In the evenings, we would sit together on the couch after dinner, Noah asleep in his bassinet, the television murmuring softly in the background. I remember once glancing around that living room, the beige walls, the family portraits of Daniel's childhood, the heavy curtains that dimmed the sunset, and thinking, this is temporary. This is just a chapter. I didn't realize I was slowly becoming a background character in my own life. The first real shift was so subtle, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. It started with how Linda spoke to Noah, not unkindly, just possessively. "My baby boy," she would say, lifting him from my arms without asking. "Grandma's sweet boy." I would smile, even when something inside me tightened. Then came the suggestions. "You know," she told me one morning while watching me prepare Noah's bottle, "when Daniel was a baby, I fed him on a stricter schedule. He slept through the night much earlier." "Oh?" I said softly. "The pediatrician recommended feeding on demand." She gave a thin smile. "Doctors these days change their minds every 5 years." Another time, she walked into the nursery while I was rocking Noah to sleep. "You're still rocking him?" she asked, glancing at the clock. "He'll never learn independence that way." "He just needs a little comfort," I replied. "He needs structure," she corrected gently. I noticed that whenever Linda made these comments, Daniel would suddenly become very interested in something else. His phone, the TV, his coffee cup. Never me. Never the tension hovering in the room like a quiet storm. One evening, after Linda went upstairs, I finally asked him, "Do you think your mom doesn't like how I'm raising Noah?" He sighed, rubbing his face. "You're overthinking it." "I'm not overthinking," I said quietly. "She corrects everything I do. She's just experienced. She raised 3 kids. And I'm raising my son." He looked at me then, but only briefly. "Let's not make this a thing, okay? We're guests in her house." Guests. That word stayed with me long after he fell asleep beside me. Guests don't rearrange their future around a home. Guests don't give birth and bring their newborn there. Guests don't unpack their lives into drawers and closets and hope to belong. Yet somehow, that's exactly what I had become. And the strangest part? I didn't notice how quiet my husband was becoming. Not until the day his silence locked me out of everything. Looking back now, I don't think the silence in our house happened all at once. It settled in slowly, like dust. Like something so fine and quiet you don't notice it until everything feels heavier to breathe. At first, it was just small things. Daniel stopped asking how my day was. Not intentionally, I think. Not cruelly, just absent-mindedly. He would come home, loosen his tie, and head straight to the kitchen where his mother already had dinner plated. She always served him first, placing the plate in front of him with a warmth in her voice that softened her features. "You must be exhausted, sweetheart," she would say, and he would smile. Not the polite smile he gave me when I talked about Noah's milestones. A different smile, an easy one, a familiar one. Meanwhile, I would be standing at the counter, bouncing Noah gently on my hip, reheating my food after everyone else had started eating. It sounds small when I say it now, but when you live inside small moments long enough, they begin to tell a bigger story. One afternoon, while folding laundry in the living room, I noticed Linda watching me. Not openly, not rudely, just from the corner of her eye as she adjusted a stack of neatly folded towels I had already arranged. "You don't have to do all this," I said softly, trying to sound appreciative. "You've done so much already." She gave a thin smile. "A home runs better when things are done properly." I paused, a tiny onesie still in my hands. "I thought I was helping." "You are, in your way. In your way." I nodded and kept folding, but something inside my chest tightened in a way I couldn't quite name. That night, Daniel stayed up later than usual. I heard the low murmur of voices from the kitchen long after I had put Noah to bed. When I walked down the hallway, I saw them sitting together at the table, their heads slightly leaned in, talking in hushed tones. They stopped when they noticed me. That was the first time. It was subtle, but unmistakable. "Oh," Linda said lightly, her smile returning instantly. "We didn't mean to wake you." I wasn't asleep. "Is everything okay?" Daniel cleared his throat. "Yeah, just bills, budget stuff." I nodded, though no papers were on the table, just 2 cups of tea and Linda's phone face down between them. "Okay," I said quietly, and walked back to the bedroom. I told myself not to overthink it. I told myself I was just tired, hormonal, adjusting to motherhood. adjusting to living in someone else's space, adjusting to being told gently but consistently that I wasn't doing things the right way. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly Linda began stepping into roles I hadn't invited her into. She started waking up earlier than me and taking Noah from his crib before I even reached the nursery. He was fussing, she would say casually, already rocking him in the living room. But he wasn't crying, just cooing, just being a baby. Another morning, I found a new feeding chart taped to the refrigerator. Structured times, exact ounces, sleep intervals written in neat handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. "Linda," I said gently when she walked in, "did you make this?" "Yes," she replied without hesitation. "Consistency will help him." I seemed overwhelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was following his cues. She tilted her head slightly. "You're young. It's natural to need guidance." The word guidance felt heavier than it should have. That evening, I showed Daniel the chart. "Did you know about this?" He glanced at it for less than a second. "Mom's just trying to help." "But she didn't ask me." "She lives here," he said simply. I stared at him. "I'm his mother." "And she's his grandmother," he replied, already scrolling through his phone. That was the first time a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the temperature of the house. After that, the changes became harder to ignore. Linda began introducing Noah to visitors as our baby. Not maliciously, not loudly, just casually enough that people laughed and moved on. "Oh, he looks just like his father," one neighbor said once. Linda beamed. "He's been such a blessing to this home." To this home, not to our family, to her home. One afternoon, I returned from a short walk with Noah and found his nursery rearranged. The rocking chair moved, the diapers reorganized, his clothes sorted differently. My hands actually trembled as I looked around. "Linda," I called. She appeared in the doorway, calm as ever. I reorganized. It was a bit cluttered. "I knew where everything was," I said softly. She crossed her arms, not aggressively, just firmly. "It's my house." The words were simple, but they landed like a quiet warning. That night, when Daniel came to bed, I turned to him in the dim light. "I feel like I'm losing space here." He sighed. "You're taking things personally again." She changed Noah's room without telling me. She was helping. "She keeps overriding me," I whispered, "with feeding, sleeping, routines, even how I hold him." Daniel rolled onto his back, staring at the ceiling. "You know Mom means well." "That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Silence filled the room. Then he said something that stayed with me long after the lights went off. "You just need to adapt. It's easier if you don't challenge her." Adapt, not communicate, not set boundaries, not protect my role as a mother. Adapt. Over the next few days, something inside me began to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet awareness that I was no longer being treated like an equal adult in that house. I started noticing how often decisions about Noah were discussed without me. How often Daniel and Linda exchanged glances before responding to my suggestions. How often my opinions were acknowledged and then gently dismissed. Then came the moment that truly unsettled me. I had just finished feeding Noah when Linda walked in holding a small envelope. "I've been looking into daycare options," she said. I blinked. "Daycare?" "Yes," she continued smoothly. "It would give you some structure, and I could oversee things." I stared at her. "I'm a stay-at-home mom." She gave a small, patient smile. "You won't always be." When Daniel came home that evening, I asked him directly, "Did you and your mom talk about putting Noah in daycare?" He hesitated. Just for a second. But I saw it. "We were just discussing possibilities," he said, "without me." That night, as I lay in bed listening to the grandfather clock chime downstairs, a thought crept into my mind that I didn't want to face. It wasn't just that Linda was controlling, it was that Daniel was letting her. And the more I paid attention, the more I realized something even more unsettling. He wasn't just staying silent, he was slowly stepping back, like a man quietly handing over the authority of his family, piece by piece. I didn't know it yet, but the argument that would end everything had already begun long before that door was ever locked. After the daycare conversation, I began noticing things I had previously excused as coincidence. Not big, dramatic things, quiet decisions, small exclusions, subtle shifts that made me feel like I was living inside a home where conversations about my child and my life were happening just slightly out of reach, like a room I wasn't invited into, even while standing in the hallway. A week later, I woke up to an unusual silence. Noah normally stirred by sunrise, his soft coos drifting through the baby monitor like a gentle alarm clock. But that morning, the monitor was silent. My stomach tightened. I hurried to the nursery. The crib was empty. For a split second, my heart dropped so sharply I had to grab the edge of the dresser to steady myself. Then I heard his laughter downstairs. Light, happy, familiar. Relief flooded me, but it was followed immediately by something else. Unease. When I walked into the living room, I found Linda sitting in her armchair, Noah in her lap, a small rattle in his hand. Morning sunlight streamed through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the scene, making it look almost picture perfect. "Oh," she said casually, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "You finally woke up." "I didn't hear him," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "When did you get him?" "He was awake," she said. "Didn't want him crying." I said softly, "He was about to." I reached for Noah, and for a brief moment, her hands hesitated before she handed him over. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but I felt it, like she didn't want to let go. That entire morning, a strange heaviness followed me. I kept replaying the image of the empty crib in my mind. Later, when Daniel came home from work, I mentioned it. "She took him out of the crib before I even woke up," I said, rocking Noah gently. Daniel loosened his tie. "So, she was helping." "She didn't even tell me." "You were asleep," he replied, simply. "I'm his mother, Daniel. And she's right there if you need rest," he said, heading toward the kitchen. "Most women would be grateful for that kind of support." Most women. I watched him walk away, and for the first time, the word grateful didn't sit well with me. Grateful people don't feel replaced. Grateful people don't wake up to empty cribs. Days passed and the pattern continued. Linda started referring to routines as our system, our feeding times, our nap schedule, our way of doing things. One afternoon, while I was sterilizing bottles at the sink, I overheard her on the phone in the dining room. "Yes," she was saying, her voice low but clear. "He's thriving. Structure makes all the difference. Young mothers tend to be emotional." My hands froze under the warm running water. I didn't move. "I'm just making sure he's raised properly. Someone has to provide stability." I stood there long after the call ended, the sound of the faucet filling the silence, my chest tightening in a way I couldn't explain. That night, I tried again with Daniel. "I heard your mom on the phone today," I said carefully. He didn't look up from his laptop. "Okay." "She said she's the one making sure Noah is raised properly." He sighed. "You're reading into things again." "I'm not reading into it," I replied quietly. "She's positioning herself like she's the primary caregiver." "That's dramatic. I'm with him all day. And she's in the house all day too," he said flatly. The words hit harder than he probably intended. I swallowed. "Do you think I'm not doing a good job?" For the first time, he paused. Then he said, "I think Mom has more experience." Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, just a soft internal fracture that no one else in the room seemed to hear. After that conversation, I stopped bringing things up as often, not because they stopped bothering me, but because every time I spoke, I felt like I was slowly being painted as the problem. Too sensitive, too emotional, too reactive. Meanwhile, Linda remained calm, polite, controlled, always reasonable on the surface, which made me look unreasonable by comparison. Then came the pediatric appointment. It was supposed to be simple, routine checkup, vaccines, growth chart, the usual. I dressed Noah in his soft blue onesie and packed the diaper bag like I always did. When I walked into the kitchen, Linda was already there, sipping tea. "I'll come with you," she said. I blinked. "Oh, you don't have to. I've got it." "I insist," she replied smoothly. "Two hands are better than one." I hesitated, then nodded. During the appointment, the doctor asked about feeding and sleep habits. Before I could answer, Linda spoke. "He's on a structured schedule," she said confidently. 4 ounces every 3 hours, naps at fixed intervals. The doctor nodded approvingly. "That's excellent consistency." I opened my mouth, then closed it, because technically it was true, but it wasn't my system. On the drive home, my hands gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual. "Next time, I'd like to answer the doctor's questions," I said gently. Linda looked at me with mild surprise. "I was just helping." "I know," I replied, "but I'm his mother." She turned her gaze to the window. "In this household, we all care for him." That word again. Household, not family. That evening, I noticed something else. My diaper bag had been repacked, not by me. The bottles were arranged differently. The wipes moved. Even the extra outfit was replaced with something Linda had bought without telling me. When I asked her about it, she simply said, "I noticed you forgot a burp cloth yesterday." "I didn't forget," I said, softly. She shrugged. "He was about to." I reached for Noah, and for a brief moment, her hands hesitated before she handed him over. It was subtle, almost unnoticeable, but I felt it, like she didn't want to let go. That entire night, a strange heaviness followed me. I kept replaying the image of the empty crib in my mind. Then, one night, I walked into the kitchen unexpectedly. Daniel and Linda were talking again in hushed voices. This time, I heard my name clearly. "She's overwhelmed," Linda said quietly. "She's adjusting," Daniel replied. "She's young and emotional. The baby needs stability." There was a pause. Then Daniel said something that made my heart stop. "I just want what's best for Noah. Not for us, not for our marriage, for Noah." And for the first time, I realized something terrifying. They weren't just discussing routines, they were discussing me, like I was a situation to be managed. Not a wife, not a mother, just a variable in their household equation. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the grandfather clock chiming in the distance, a quiet thought settled over me. Something was changing in that house. Not suddenly, not loudly, but steadily. And deep down, I began to fear that the argument that would eventually lead to that locked door wouldn't start with shouting. It would start with one calm, calculated sentence. The sentence came on a Tuesday afternoon. Quiet, measured, almost polite. And yet it altered the course of my life more than any shouting ever could have. It started with something small. It always does. Noah had been unusually fussy that morning, teething, I suspected. He clung to me more than usual, his tiny fingers gripping my shirt as if I were the only safe place he knew. I spent the morning pacing the nursery, humming softly, breathing in the faint scent of baby lotion and laundry detergent that clung to his blankets. By noon, he finally fell asleep against my shoulder. I carried him carefully downstairs, intending to lay him in the crib. But the crib was already made differently. The sheets were changed. The blanket I always used was gone, replaced with one I didn't recognize. My chest tightened. "Linda?" I called gently. She appeared from the hallway, calm as ever, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I replaced the bedding," she said. "The old one looked worn." "It was washed yesterday," I replied quietly. She smiled faintly. "This one is better quality." I stood there, Noah still sleeping in my arms, staring at the crib that suddenly felt unfamiliar. "I prefer his usual blanket," I said softly. She tilted her head. "You'll get used to this one." That phrase again. You'll get used to it. To the changes, to the adjustments, to the quiet replacement of my choices. Later that afternoon, Daniel came home earlier than usual. That alone made me uneasy. He rarely came home before 6. But that day, he walked in at 4, his expression unreadable, his shoulders slightly tense. He loosened his tie slowly, like a man preparing for a difficult conversation he wasn't sure how to start. "Hey," I said carefully, "everything okay?" "Yeah," he replied. "Just wanted to talk." My stomach dropped. Talk. Not "how was your day?" Not "how's Noah?" Just talk. Linda was already in the living room when we sat down. She didn't excuse herself, didn't pretend to give us privacy. She simply folded her hands neatly in her lap and watched us both with quiet composure. That was my first clue that this wasn't a spontaneous conversation. This was planned. Daniel began. "Mom and I have been discussing some things." I felt my pulse quicken. "About what?" He glanced at Linda briefly before continuing. "About the household and how things have been going." I shifted Noah slightly in my arms. "What do you mean?" Linda spoke then, her tone gentle, almost sympathetic. "We're concerned about you." The words were so soft they almost didn't register. "Concerned?" I repeated. "You seem overwhelmed, tired, emotional, struggling to adjust." "I'm a new mother," I said quietly. "That's normal." "Of course," she replied smoothly, "but stability is important for the baby." There it was again. The baby. Not my son, not Noah. The baby. I looked at Daniel. "Do you agree with this?" He hesitated. That hesitation hurt more than any accusation. He said, "I think that you've been under a lot of stress. I take care of Noah all day. I cook, I clean, I adjust to living in your mother's house." "Our house," Linda corrected calmly. I turned toward her. "It's your house, but he is my child." Silence filled the room. Heavy, thick, uncomfortable. Linda's expression didn't change, but her voice lost a fraction of her warmth. "No one is questioning that you gave birth to him." The phrasing stunned me. Gave birth to him. Not raised, not nurtured, not loved. Just gave birth. "I'm his mother," I said, my voice trembling despite my effort to remain calm. "And we are his support system, which includes making sure he is raised in a stable environment." I looked at Daniel again, my heart pounding. Why did this feel like an intervention? He rubbed his hands nervously. "It's not an intervention. Then what is it?" Another pause. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. "Maybe it would be better if Mom took a more active role with Noah for a while." The room felt like it tilted. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "What?" "You've been stressed," he continued quickly, "and Mom has experience. It's temporary, just until things settle." My arms instinctively tightened around Noah. "You want your mother," I said slowly, "to take over caring for my child." "No," he said defensively, "not take over, just lead more." Lead, as if motherhood was a project management role. "As in feeding schedules, routines, appointments," Linda added calmly. "Consistency benefits infants greatly." I stared at both of them, and in that moment, something inside me shifted from confusion to clarity. This wasn't about helping. This was about control. "You've been making decisions about my son without me," I said quietly, talking about daycare, changing routines, speaking to doctors, rearranging his room. "We live together," Linda replied. "Decisions affect everyone." "He is not a shared household responsibility," I said, my voice firmer now. "He is my child." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Why are you making this confrontational?" Because you're asking me to step back from my own baby. No one is asking you to step back, he insisted. Then why do I feel like a guest in my own motherhood? That question hung in the air, unanswered, uncomfortable. Linda stood slowly, smoothing her blouse. This defensiveness, she said gently, is exactly what concerns us. I blinked. Defensiveness? Yes, she continued. Every suggestion is seen as an attack. Every adjustment becomes a conflict. Because you never ask me, I replied. We shouldn't have to ask to help our grandson, she said. I didn't ask for help that replaces me. Silence again. Daniel's voice came out lower this time. Mom has been doing a lot for us. The least we can do is respect her home and her involvement. Respect her home. There it was, the reminder, the subtle power dynamic that had been quietly building for months. I looked around the living room, the furniture I hadn't chosen, the family portraits that didn't include me, the house that never truly felt like mine. And for the first time, a frightening realization settled over me. This wasn't just a disagreement about parenting. This was about territory, authority, and my place in a house where my role was slowly being negotiated without my consent. I stood up slowly, Noah still in my arms. I am not stepping back from my child, I said quietly. Linda's expression hardened, just slightly. Then, perhaps, she said, her voice now cool instead of gentle, we need to discuss boundaries. And the way she said boundaries didn't sound like a discussion. It sounded like a warning.